Hi, hello, and welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, this is the place where we dive into real, raw confessions, the kind people don't usually say out loud. Today's story is tense, emotional, and packed with years of bottled-up resentment. It's not pretty, and it's definitely not simple. Because today's confession is titled, I Hate My Stepsister. Take a breath, get comfortable, and let's get into the story. I was standing in the middle of her bedroom, holding the one thing I knew I should never touch. The screen of her phone was still warm from her palm, and the blue light cast a sickly glow over my fingers. I could hear the shower running down the hall, a steady rhythmic drumming against the tile that gave me exactly 7 minutes of privacy. My heart wasn't racing. That was the strangest part. I felt a cold, clinical calm as I scrolled through the messages she thought were buried under layers of encryption. I wasn't just looking for dirt. I was looking for a way to delete her from our lives. Then I saw the notification from the university admissions board, and the cursor of my thumb hovered over the withdraw application button. One tap, and the future she had spent 3 years building would vanish. The door handle to the bathroom clicked, and the water stopped. It wasn't supposed to be like this. When her mother moved in 3 years ago, I expected friction, but I didn't expect a total eclipse. My father didn't just fall in love with a woman. He fell in love with a new version of a family where I was a supporting character in someone else's pilot episode. She moved into the guest room, and within 6 months it was her room. Her posters on the walls. Her scent of cheap vanilla and expensive hairspray clogging the vents. She was perfect in the way people are when they are trying to hide a void. She was polite. She was helpful. She called my father sir until he insisted on dad, and I felt the air leave my lungs like I'd been punched. I started small. It was just a way to reclaim space at first. I would move her keys so she'd be late for practice. I would accidentally wash her favorite wool sweater on high heat until it was sized for a doll. These were petty crimes, the kind of things a frustrated teenager does when they feel invisible. But she never fought back. She would just smile that tight-lipped smile and apologize for being so forgetful or careless. Her grace was a weapon. It made me look like the unstable one. It made my father look at me with a mixture of pity and exhaustion that burned worse than any argument. The resentment grew into something structural. It was the foundation of my daily routine. I spent my afternoons studying her life not out of interest, but out of a need for a tactical advantage. I knew her passwords because she used the same string of numbers for everything. The date her biological father walked out. It was a pathetic bit of sentimentality that gave me total access to her digital existence. I watched her build a life that seemed designed to highlight my failures. When I got a C in chemistry, she was named captain of the debate team. When I stayed home on a Friday night, she was out at the bonfire with people who used to be my friends. She didn't just take my father, she took my context. She became the standard against which I was failing. Standing there in her room, with the damp air from the hallway beginning to seep under the door, I looked at the withdrawal button again. It was morally indefensible. I knew that. If I did this, she would lose her scholarship. She would be stuck here in this town, in this house with us for another year. But that wasn't the goal. The goal was to see her break. I wanted to see the mask of perfection slip just once. I wanted my father to see her as a failure, as someone who couldn't even manage a simple administrative task. I wanted him to see that his new daughter was just as flawed and disappointing as the original model. I pressed the button. The confirmation screen flashed. Are you sure you wish to withdraw your application? This action cannot be undone. I tapped yes with a steady hand. I tucked the phone back onto her nightstand exactly where she'd left it, angled slightly toward the lamp. I retreated to my room and closed the door just as I heard her footsteps in the hall. She was humming something. She sounded happy. I sat on the edge of my bed and waited for the guilt to arrive, but it never did. Instead, there was a sense of profound relief. I had finally leveled the playing field. Dinner that night was an exercise in theatrical normalcy. My father was talking about a promotion. Her mother was laughing at a joke that wasn't particularly funny. And she, the girl who no longer had a future at the state's top university, was sitting there eating salad and talking about how excited she was for the fall semester. I think I'll major in psychology, she said, looking directly at me. It's fascinating how people hide their true intentions. How a person can act one way while feeling something completely different underneath. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. She was smiling, but her eyes were flat and unblinking. She reached for the water pitcher and her sleeve slid back, just enough for me to see a series of small, precise marks on her forearm. Not the kind of marks you get from an accident. They were numbers. I realized then that she wasn't the victim I thought I was sabotaging. She had been watching me watch her. As we cleared the plates, she leaned in close to my ear. Her voice was a whisper that barely carried over the sound of the dishwasher. "I left my phone unlocked on purpose today," she said. "I wanted to see if you'd actually do it. I needed a reason to do what comes next." She walked away before I could respond. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a notification from the bank. My college fund, the one my mother had left for me, was empty. The balance was zero. I looked up and saw her standing at the top of the stairs. She wasn't smiling anymore. She just stared at me with a look of absolute cold clarity. I realized then that I hadn't destroyed her future. I had just given her permission to destroy mine. But the mystery wasn't the money. The mystery was the email that popped up a second later on my screen. A message from an anonymous sender containing a photo of my father that I had never seen before, taken in a place he claimed he had never been. The silence after she spoke was heavier than the noise that had come before it. I stood in the kitchen with a stack of dirty plates in my hands, and I could feel the blood draining from my face. The zero on my bank app screen seemed to pulse like a heartbeat. That money was my mother's legacy. It was the only thing I had that didn't belong to this new house or this new life. And in one afternoon it was gone. I didn't scream. I didn't even drop the plates. I just walked to the sink and started the faucet and watched the water disappear down the drain. My father was in the living room laughing at something on the television. He had no idea that his world was currently being dismantled by the two people he claimed to love most. Or maybe he did. Maybe the photo on my phone was the proof that he had been dismantling it himself for years. The photo was grainy but unmistakable. It showed my father standing on the porch of a small blue bungalow on the north side of town. He was holding a grocery bag in one hand and a set of keys in the other. The timestamp was from last Tuesday, a night he said he was working late at the office. But it wasn't the location that bothered me. It was the way he looked. He looked relaxed. He looked like he was home. I waited until the house was quiet. I waited until the rhythmic snoring of my father and his wife drifted through the vents. Then I crept down the hall to her room. I didn't knock. I just turned the handle and stepped inside. She was sitting at her desk with the lamp off. The only light came from the moon filtering through the blinds. She didn't look surprised to see me. She was holding a small leather-bound notebook, and she was writing with a pen that moved with terrifying precision. "Give it back," I said. My voice was a dry rasp. She didn't look up. "Give what back? The future you threw away for me? Or the money you think you're entitled to? That wasn't yours to touch. That was my mother's. And that application wasn't yours to withdraw," she countered, finally looking at me. Her eyes were dark and bottomless. "You wanted to see me break. You wanted to see me crawl. But you forgot that I've already been broken. I was born in the wreckage. You've lived in a glass house your whole life. I just threw the first stone. I'll tell him," I threatened. "I'll tell my father what you did. I'll tell him you're a thief." She laughed. It was a soft melodic sound that made my skin crawl. "Go ahead. Tell him. And while you're at it, ask him about the house on Miller Street. Ask him why he's been paying the utilities on a property he doesn't own for the last 5 years. Ask him who lives there." I felt the floor tilt beneath my feet. "How do you know about Miller Street?" "I'm not the only one who watches," she said, standing up. She walked toward me until we were inches apart. I could smell the vanilla again. It felt like a chokehold. "We are the same. You hate me because I'm the mirror you don't want to look into. You're selfish and you're cruel, and you'll do anything to keep what's yours. The only difference is that I'm better at it." She handed me the notebook. I opened it to the last page. There was a list of dates and amounts. It was a ledger of every cent she had moved out of my account. But it wasn't sitting in her bank. She had moved it into a trust for the people at the house on Miller Street. "He has another daughter," she whispered. "A real one. Not a project like me. Not a burden like you. A 6-year-old girl named Maya who looks just like him. Our father is a man of many secrets. I just decided to use your money to fund his guilt." I felt a surge of pure white-hot rage. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was the betrayal. My father had spent years lecturing me about honesty and integrity while he was building a second life in the shadows. And she, the girl I hated, had used my inheritance to pay for his lies. "Why?" I asked. "If you hate him as much as I do, why help him?" "I'm not helping him," she said. "I'm holding him hostage. And now so are you." She explained the plan. It was simple and devastating. We wouldn't tell him we knew. We wouldn't blow up the family. Instead, we would bleed him dry. She had already started by moving my money into the other family's account. Now she wanted me to help her find the rest of his hidden assets. She wanted us to be partners in a slow-motion extortion. I should have walked away. I should have gone to my father and demanded the truth. I should have been the better person. But I looked at her, and I saw the logic in the madness. If the world was going to be built on lies, I might as well be the one holding the blueprints. I need my money back first, I said. You'll get it, she promised. Twice over. But first we have to go to Miller Street. I want you to see what you're paying for. We left the house at 2 in the morning. We took my car and drove in silence through the empty streets. The town looked different in the dark. It looked like a stage set after the play had ended. When we pulled up to the bungalow, I saw a tricycle on the lawn. I saw a small pink backpack hanging from a hook on the porch. I got out of the car and walked toward the window. I knew it was wrong. I knew I was trespassing on a life that didn't belong to me. But I had to see. I pulled back the edge of the curtain just enough to look inside. The living room was small but warm. There were photos on the mantle. My father was in all of them. He was smiling. He was holding a small girl. He looked like the man I thought he was 10 years ago. And then I saw the woman. She was sitting on the sofa reading a book. She looked tired but peaceful. She looked nothing like my stepmother. She looked like someone who believed every word my father told her. I felt a sudden, sickening realization. My stepsister wasn't doing this to punish my father. She was doing it to destroy me. She had brought me here to show me that I wasn't just replaceable. I had already been replaced. I was the old version. I was the legacy project that had failed. I turned back to the car, but she was standing right behind me. "Do you see now?" she asked. "I see everything," I said. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I didn't call my father. I didn't call the police. I opened the camera app and I took a photo of the woman and the child through the window. Then I took a photo of the mailbox with the name on it. "What are you doing?" she asked, her eyes narrowing. "You wanted a partner," I said. "But I don't work for you. I'm going to send these photos to your mother. I'm going to tell her that you've been helping him hide this. I'm going to tell her that the money you stole was the hush money he gave you." Her face went pale. For the first time, the mask slipped. The confidence vanished, and I saw the terrified girl underneath. "You can't do that," she stammered. "She'll leave him. We'll have nothing." "Exactly," I said. "I don't care about the money anymore. I just want to see the whole house burn down." I started to walk back to the car, but she grabbed my arm. Her grip was desperate. Her nails dug into my skin. "Wait," she hissed. "Look at the door." The front door of the bungalow was opening. My father stepped out onto the porch. He wasn't wearing his work clothes. He was wearing a bathrobe and slippers. He looked at us standing by the car, and his face didn't register fear. It didn't register guilt. He just sighed like he'd been waiting for this moment for a long time. "I wondered which one of you would find me first," he said. "Come inside. We need to talk about your mother." He didn't mean my stepmother, and he didn't mean her biological mother. He meant my mother, the woman who was supposed to be dead. The living room of the bungalow smelled like cedar and old paper, a sharp contrast to the suffocating vanilla of our house across town. It was a space that felt lived in, cluttered with the debris of a real life. A half-finished puzzle on the coffee table, a pair of child's sneakers by the door, and a stack of mail that didn't belong to us. I sat on the edge of a floral-patterned sofa that felt uncomfortably soft, my hands tucked under my thighs to stop them from shaking. My stepsister stood by the window, her silhouette sharp against the moonlight, looking less like a conqueror and more like a ghost. My father sat in a wooden rocking chair across from us. He didn't look like a man caught in a lie. He looked like a man who had finally put down a heavy suitcase. He reached into the pocket of his robe and pulled out a small, tarnished silver locket. I recognized it instantly. It was the one my mother was wearing in the only photo I had of her from the year she supposedly died in that car accident. "Your mother didn't die in the rain on I-95, he said, his voice level and devoid of the performative grief he'd worn like a suit for a decade. "She didn't die at all. She left. And she didn't just leave me. She left you." The words felt like physical blows, dull and heavy. I looked at the woman standing in the kitchen doorway, the one I'd seen through the window. She wasn't my mother. She was younger, with tired eyes and a kind, cautious mouth. She held a mug of tea toward me, but I didn't reach for it. My mind was spinning, trying to reconcile the image of the saintly, departed woman I'd mourned with the reality of a woman who had simply walked away. Why lie? I whispered. Why tell me she was gone? Because the truth was worse, he said, leaning forward. She didn't want to be a mother. She didn't want the life we had. She told me if I didn't let her go, she'd make sure neither of us ever found peace. So I gave her everything we had in the savings. I told the world she was dead to protect your memory of her. I thought it was better to be the child of a tragedy than the child of a rejection. I looked at my stepsister. She was staring at him with a strange, jagged intensity. And what about the money? She asked. The college fund you let me steal from him? You knew I was doing it. You watched me move the numbers. He turned his gaze to her, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of something like respect in his eyes. I knew you were smart. I knew you'd find the accounts eventually. I let you take it because I wanted to see if you'd use it to run away or if you'd use it to find the truth. You found Miller Street. You brought him here. You did exactly what I hoped you would. I felt a wave of nausea. We were being played. The rivalry, the sabotage, the resentment. It wasn't just us being teenagers. It was a controlled environment. He had been pit against us, or rather, had allowed us to pit ourselves against each other to see who was strong enough to handle the reality of his double life. You used my mother's death to control me, I said, my voice rising. You let me live in a house with a woman I hate, with a girl I've spent years trying to destroy, all while you had this? You have a daughter here who gets the version of you that doesn't lie? Who gets a father who stays? I looked toward the hallway where the 6-year-old was presumably sleeping, blissfully unaware that her life was funded by the ghost of my inheritance. I felt a dark, oily surge of spite. It wasn't enough that I had been lied to. I wanted to hurt him the way the truth was hurting me. I wanted to take this piece away from him. I'm calling the police, I said, pulling out my phone. I'm calling them and telling them about the insurance money. You claimed a life insurance policy on a woman who was still alive. That's fraud. That's prison. My father didn't move. He didn't even blink. You could do that, he said. But then you'd have to explain why you withdrew her university application today. You'd have to explain the digital trail of harassment you've left for 3 years. If I go down, I'm taking the whole house with me. Your stepsister, too. She's been moving money through offshore apps for months. We're all criminals here, kid. That's the family business. The room went silent, save for the ticking of a clock in the kitchen. I looked at my stepsister. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking at the silver locket in his hand. He's right, she said softly. We can't go to the police. We can't tell my mother. If we do, we lose everything. We become the headlines in a town that already loves to whisper about us. She walked over to me and put a hand on my shoulder. Her touch was cold, but her grip was firm. For the first time, we weren't enemies. We were two people standing on a sinking ship, realizing there was only one lifeboat. So what do? I asked, looking from her to my father. We negotiate, she said. For the next 3 hours, we sat in that cedar-scented room and tore our lives apart to see what was worth keeping. My father agreed to restore my fund, using the money he'd hidden in the other family's accounts. He agreed to sign the house over to my stepmother and move out, officially ending the charade of their marriage. In exchange, we would keep his secret. We would let him have his little bungalow and his quiet life with his new daughter, provided he disappeared from ours. But as the sun began to peek through the blinds, I realized the negotiation wasn't just about money or houses. It was about the power dynamic that had shifted. My stepsister and I were no longer the children. We were the keepers of the gate. When we finally walked out of the bungalow, the air was crisp and smelled of morning dew. We walked to the car in silence. I got into the driver's seat and she sat beside me. You know he's still lying about something, she said, staring straight ahead. How do you know? Because the locket, she said. I saw the inside of it when he set it on the table. There wasn't a picture of your mother in it. There was a picture of mine, from before they met. I felt a cold shiver. What does that mean? It means my mother didn't just meet him at a grocery store 3 years ago. It means they've known each other since before we were born. It means this whole blended family wasn't a mistake or a second chance. It was a plan. I started the engine, my mind racing. If they had known each other that long, then the car accident, the disappearance, the move, it was all part of a larger architecture. My stepsister reached into her bag and pulled out a small, folded piece of paper she must have swiped from the desk when we were leaving. She unfolded it and held it up. It was a birth certificate for the girl inside, Maya. But the mother's name wasn't the woman in the kitchen. It was my mother's name. I looked at the paper, then at the quiet, unassuming bungalow. The woman in the kitchen wasn't the mother. She was the nanny. My mother hadn't just left me. She had started over with a new child in the same town, while my father watched over both of us like a warden. "She's in there," I whispered, the realization shattering whatever was left of my sanity. She was in the house the whole time. She just didn't come out to see me. My stepsister looked at me, and for the first time, I saw genuine pity in her eyes. But underneath the pity was that same calculating spark. She knew she had the ultimate leverage now, not just over my father, but over me. "I have a plan," she said, her voice dropping to a low, conspiratorial hum. "But it requires you to do something truly unforgivable. Are you in?" I looked at the house, at the life I thought I knew, and at the girl who had been my tormentor and was now my only ally. I thought about the withdraw button I had pressed. I thought about the zero in my bank account. I thought about the woman who was hiding in a back room while her firstborn sat 10 feet away. "Tell me what to do," I said. As we backed out of the driveway, I saw a curtain flutter in the darkened window of the master bedroom. A pale hand reached out and closed the blinds. The engine of my car hummed a low, vibrating chord that seemed to match the frequency of the panic in my chest. We drove away from Miller Street, the small bungalow shrinking in the rearview mirror until it was just another dark shape in a town full of secrets. Beside me, she was silent, her fingers tracing the edges of the birth certificate like she was reading Braille. "The plan," I said, my voice cracking the silence. "Tell me." She didn't look at me. "My mother is a proud woman. If she finds out she's been the decoy wife while your mother lived 5 miles away in a house paid for by her own husband's earnings, she won't just leave. She'll burn every bridge. She'll take the house, the cars, and every cent of the joint accounts. My father will be left with nothing but a bungalow and a fraud charge. And how does that help us?" I asked. "We'd be homeless too." "No," she said, finally turning to look at me. Her eyes were sharp, devoid of the tears I expected. "We don't tell her the whole truth. We tell her a version of it. We tell her your father is being blackmailed by a woman from his past, a woman who is threatening to ruin his career. We make my mother the hero. We get her to move the rest of the money into an account in our names, for safekeeping, before the blackmailer can get to it. And then, we deal with the woman in the bungalow ourselves." "What do you mean, deal with her?" "We give her a choice," she whispered. "She can stay hidden and watch her daughter grow up in poverty while her husband goes to jail, or she can sign over the Miller Street house to us and disappear for good. No more watching from the windows. No more playing ghost." The unforgivable part wasn't the theft. It was the fact that I would have to look at that 6-year-old girl, my sister, and decide that her stability was worth less than my revenge. I would have to be the one to break that household, to walk into that warm, cedar-scented living room and tell a child that her father was a criminal and her mother was a lie. We spent the next 2 days in a state of hyper-focused cooperation. We were no longer stepsisters. We were business partners in a firm built on spite. I went to the bank and watched as she expertly navigated the digital transfers, using the passwords she'd squeezed out of my father during that sunrise negotiation. We moved the money. We shifted the assets. We were building a wall around ourselves made of my father's stolen wealth. But the final step required me to go back to Miller Street. Alone, I pulled up to the bungalow at noon. The sun was bright and unforgiving, highlighting the peeling paint on the porch and the discarded toys in the yard. I walked up the steps, my heart a heavy, rhythmic thud against my ribs. I didn't knock. I used the key I had lifted from my father's bathrobe the night before. The house was quiet. The nanny, the woman I'd seen in the kitchen, was out with Maya at the park. I walked down the narrow hallway toward the back room where I'd seen the curtain move. I pushed the door open. It wasn't a bedroom. It was an office, lined with bookshelves and filled with the smell of old paper and expensive ink. A woman sat at a desk, her back to me. She was writing in a notebook, her posture elegant and familiar. "I expected you yesterday," she said, without turning around. The voice was like a ghost reaching out of a grave. It was the voice that had tucked me in and sang to me, the voice that had been silenced in my head by a decade of mourning. She turned around slowly. She looked older, of course, but the eyes were the same. Cold, analytical. "You didn't die," I said. It wasn't a question. "I survived," she corrected. She stood up and walked toward me. She didn't reach out to hug me. She didn't cry. She looked at me the way a scientist looks at a specimen that has finally developed a brain. Your father told you the truth, I assume? About why I left. He said you didn't want to be a mother. He said you were a runner. She smiled, a thin, sharp line. I didn't want to be his wife. There's a difference. But I couldn't leave you entirely. I wanted to see how you'd turn out. I wanted to see if you had my steel or his softness. You watched me, I said, the rage finally bubbling up, hot and acidic. You lived 5 miles away while I cried for you. You watched me grow up with a woman who hated me and a stepsister who tried to ruin me. You sat in this room and played house with another child while I was mourning a ghost. And look at you now, she said, gesturing to my trembling hands. You found me. You've outsmarted your father. You've formed an alliance with a girl you loathe. You've become exactly what you needed to be to survive this family. If I had stayed, you would have been soft. You would have been ordinary. The sheer, clinical cruelty of her words was the final snap. I realized then that my father hadn't lied to protect me. He had lied because he was terrified of her. She was the architect of this entire nightmare. She had stayed close not out of love, but out of curiosity, to see if her first experiment would survive the vacuum she left behind. I pulled out the documents my stepsister and I had prepared. I don't care about your reasons, I said, my voice steadying. I've already moved the money. My father's accounts are empty. This house is in my name now. You have 24 hours to pack your things and leave this town. If you don't, I go to the authorities with the life insurance fraud. I'll make sure the world knows you're alive, and then I'll make sure they know what kind of mother stays in the shadows of her own child's funeral. She looked at the papers, then back at me. For the first time, I saw a flicker of something that might have been pride. Or maybe it was just recognition. And what about Maya? She asked. She's your sister. You destroy her life just to spite me? I'm doing for her what you did for me, I said, the words tasting like ash. I'm giving her the gift of a clean break. She'll be better off without you, just like I was. It was a lie. I knew it was a lie as I said it. I was destroying a 6-year-old's world because I couldn't bear to be the only one who had been abandoned. It was the most selfish, most questionable thing I had ever done. But as I looked at my mother's cold, beautiful face, I knew it was the only way to win. I left the house without looking back. That evening, I sat on the porch of our vanilla house with my stepsister. We didn't talk. We just watched the sunset bleed across the sky. Inside, my father was packing his bags, his world having collapsed into a series of cardboard boxes. His wife was in the kitchen, staring at a bank statement that showed more money than she had ever seen. Money she thought was a shield, but was actually a leash. Is it done? My stepsister asked. It's done, I said. She leaned back, her shoulder brushing mine. We were bonded now, tied together by the crimes we'd committed and the secrets we'd buried. We had our money. We had our power. But as I looked at her, I realized we had lost the one thing we were both fighting for, the belief that we were better than our parents. The front door opened and my father stepped out. He looked smaller, older. He looked at us, 2 girls sitting in the twilight, and he didn't say goodbye. He just walked to his car and drove away. You know, my stepsister said, her voice barely a whisper. Now that they're all gone, I think I actually hate you more than I did before. I looked at the empty street where my father's car had been. I felt a hollow, aching void where my resentment used to be. I know, I said. I feel the same way. I checked my phone one last time. There was a message from an unknown number. No text, just a photo. It was a picture of me and my stepsister sitting on the porch, taken from the trees across the street. My mother hadn't left. She was just moving to a different shadow. Sometimes, you win by burning every bridge behind you, but you forget that you're still standing in the smoke. We got the money, we got the house, and we finally got the truth, but the truth didn't set us free. It just built a bigger cage with more expensive bars. Now, every time a floorboard creaks in the middle of the night, or a phone buzzes with a notification from an unknown number, we don't look at each other with triumph. We look at each other with the same cold, quiet fear that has become our only inheritance. We realize too late that when you play a game where the only prize is survival, you end up becoming the very thing you were trying to outrun. My mother is out there, somewhere in the dark, and we are here, waiting for the next photo to arrive. Because in this family, the only thing more dangerous than a lie is the person who's still watching you tell it.